What does it really mean when your former colonizer starts praising you? It means you're playing their game, by their rules. And in Africa, that praise often comes gift-wrapped as foreign aid, polite on the surface, but laced with strings that tighten over time. Take Niger. For years, they nodded, signed the papers, and accepted the handouts. But here's the twist. Aid that looks like help can often feel like a leash. So what happens when Niger finally says no? When a sovereign African nation stands tall and says, keep your money, we'll build our own future on our own terms? That's not just defiance. That's a revolution in motion. That's exactly what just happened in Niger. The European Union tried to play its usual card, quietly slipping in 1.3 million euros, supposedly for flood victims. A generous gesture? On the surface, maybe. But Niger wasn't fooled. Instead of saying thank you, Niger said, no thanks. The door wasn't just shut, it was slammed. And now, the EU ambassador is packing bags, recalled in quiet humiliation. Why? Because Niger's new military-led government isn't just rejecting money. They're exposing the truth. That so-called humanitarian handout? It came with invisible chains. This wasn't aid. It was influence. And Niger just refused to be bought. So what really went down in Niger? Why would a country battling deadly floods turn down 1.3 million euros in aid? And what does this bold move reveal about Africa's growing resistance to European control? In this video, we break it all down. At first glance, the story seems absurd. A nation in crisis rejecting help. Floods wreak havoc across Niger, and the European Union steps in with a 1.3 million euro gift. But instead of gratitude, they're met with a firm, unapologetic no. Why? Because Niger's transitional government understands something deeper than rising waters. It sees the real threat, foreign influence, sneaking in under the mask of humanitarian aid. This wasn't just about rejecting money. It was about rejecting manipulation, dependency, and the same old colonial playbook wrapped in euros. So now the world is watching. Is this the start of a new African posture? One that trades charity for sovereignty? Stick around, because what happened in Niger might just be the warning shot echoing across the continent. To the average Western observer, Niger's rejection of aid might seem irrational, even reckless. But to many Africans, especially in the Sahel, this isn't shocking. It's familiar. It's déjà vu, just repackaged. They call it aid. But what is it really? It's a tool, a shortcut, a way to bypass African institutions, a way to sideline transitional governments, a way to quietly erode sovereignty without ever firing a shot. Here's what the EU did. Instead of going through Niger's government, they quietly wired 1.3 million euros to select NGOs, handpicked, foreign-aligned, and often deeply embedded in the West's political, ideological, and yes, intelligence networks. These groups operate without oversight, without consent, and without accountability. They walk in under the banner of relief, but what they install is influence. They claim to help, but what they really hijack is legitimacy. Every check they write isn't just a donation, it's a passport. Every handout is a potential Trojan horse. And Niger just slammed the gates shut. Let's get one thing straight. Niger didn't reject compassion. It rejected infiltration. This wasn't about turning away help. It was about defending the right to decide how that help reaches the people and who gets to deliver it. Because in this new Africa, sovereignty is not for sale. And when a foreign power enters without knocking, it's not seen as generosity. It's seen as a violation. This wasn't some emotional outburst. It wasn't pride. It was principle. Niger was sending a clear message. If you don't respect our government, don't expect access to our people. This wasn't aid diplomacy. This was a neo-colonial move dressed in a humanitarian disguise. And Niger called it out, loud and clear. That moment wasn't just defiance, it was a line in the sand. Now across the continent, other African nations are watching. Nations tired of being lectured, tired of puppet politics, tired of the strings attached to every so-called act of benevolence. Maybe Niger didn't just reject a check. Maybe it declared a new era, an era where Africa stops begging and starts building on its own terms. But to truly understand Niger's bold refusal, we need to rewind the tape. Back to the ghost still haunting its political halls, Mohamed Bazoum. To Europe, Bazoum was the perfect face of African democracy. They soft-spoken, compliant, always camera-ready for the next donor-funded photo op. But behind the smiles and handshakes, what was really happening? Under Bazoum, Niger became wide open, not to opportunity, but to occupation. Western military bases, approved, mining deals, signed and sealed, often in the West's favor. Development, partnerships, more like extraction agreements in disguise. The EU poured in 500 million euros in development aid. France added another 120 million euros in just 1 year. But here's the twist. That money wasn't free. It came with expectations, with oversight that looked more like control, and with policies that served European interests first. So when Niger's new leadership says no more, they're not being ungrateful. They're breaking a cycle where sovereignty was traded for applause. And now the applause has stopped, but the awakening has begun. When the military took over in July 2023, the West didn't just lose a friend, they lost a proxy. Mohamed Bazoum was out, and with him went the polite diplomacy, the open-door policies, and the quiet compliance. In his place, General Abdurrahman Chiani, and a junta that wasn't here to play houseboy to foreign powers. They weren't trained in cocktail diplomacy or press conferences with Western donors. They were trained to defend their land, their people, and their sovereignty. And that's exactly what they did. No more deals behind closed doors, just a clear message to the world. This is our house now, and we make the rules. And just like that, the game changed. They kicked out French troops. They defied the IMF. They didn't just flip the script. They ended the game. The West called it a coup. But Niger called it a course correction. So fast forward to 2025, 2 years after Europe labeled Niger illegitimate, and suddenly the EU wants to send 1.3 million euros in aid. Nice gesture? Maybe. But the junta didn't forget. Because this wasn't a case of neighborly concern. This was the same old master, trying to sneak back in through the servant's entrance. Was that 1.3 million euros a lifeline? Or was it a quiet attempt to resurrect Bazoum's ghost? By pumping money into NGOs, media outlets, and community gatekeepers loyal to the ousted regime? Niger had every reason to believe it was the latter. And when you're trying to break free from a history of manipulation and dependency, you don't let ghosts like Bazoum slip back in through the mail slot. This wasn't just about money. This was about memory. And Niger remembered everything. Before we dive back in, quick question. Are you enjoying the video so far? If you are, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more African news and gists. All right, let's keep going. And here's where insult turns into outrage. Right after the coup, France and the EU didn't wait. They slammed the brakes on nearly 1 billion euros in aid. Instantly. No talks, no negotiations, just cold, calculated punishment. The message was crystal clear: obey or suffer. That's what Niger got for daring to reject the West's handpicked leader. And now, after stripping the country of 1 billion euros, the EU shows up in the middle of a disaster, waving around 1.3 million euros and expects gratitude? Let's be honest. How do you starve a nation of resources, then expect applause for tossing a few crumbs? Simple. You only do that if you still believe that nation owes you obedience, that it'll come crawling back, begging for whatever scraps you decide to throw its way. But Niger didn't crawl, it stood. And in that stance, a new Africa is taking shape. So ask yourself, was this aid or was it arrogance? But Niger didn't crawl, it stood up, and it said no. The EU didn't even try to respect the country's sovereignty. They didn't channel the funds through Niger's government. Instead, they quietly wired the money to NGOs and international organizations, bypassing the very leadership they had spent 2 years calling illegitimate. You see, that's not aid. That's a provocation. And Niger didn't respond with outrage. It responded with clarity. If we are illegitimate in your eyes, then your money has no place here. This wasn't about turning down help. It was about rejecting humiliation. Because that 1.3 million euros, it wasn't just a check. It was a test. And Niger passed it with pride. Because when a country refuses money at its most vulnerable moment, you know one thing for sure. It is no longer for sale. Let that sink in. This is more than politics. This is the sound of a nation reclaiming its dignity. Niger's rejection of European Union aid wasn't just a diplomatic disagreement. It was a spark that hit a dry forest of frustration and set it on fire. When Niger said no to the EU's 1.3 million euros, Europe didn't respond with humility. It didn't pause to reflect. It responded with fury. They recalled their ambassador for consultations, a polite phrase wrapped around a heavy insult, a message that said, "How dare you disobey?" But beneath the formal language, a deeper truth was sinking in. Europe had lost something it didn't even realize it was still clinging to: its authority over African decisions. For decades, the EU didn't deal with the people. It dealt with the elite. Men like Mohamed Bazoum, men who flew to Brussels, smiled in Paris, nodded through policy meetings, and signed off on plans they neither wrote nor owned. But that era, it's fading fast. Because this new generation of African leadership isn't interested in being managed. They're not here for lectures. They're here for liberation. And Niger, it just lit the match. The question now isn't whether Europe is ready for a new Africa. It's whether Africa is ready to lead without permission. Stick around, the fire's just getting started. For decades, Europe acted like Africa was theirs to manage. That handing out foreign aid gave them the license to interfere, to dictate, to dominate. But today, that old script is being shredded. Leaders like General Chiani in Niger, Captain Traoré in Burkina Faso, and Colonel Goïta in Mali aren't just rejecting shady deals. They're dismantling the entire system that made those deals possible. They're flipping the table and refusing to play by colonial rules dressed up as partnerships. But here's the beauty of it. This awakening isn't limited to presidential palaces. It's spilling into the streets. It's in the hands of citizens waving their national flags and tearing down the last remains of French military outposts. It's in the voices of local radio hosts asking hard questions. It's in classrooms where African history is being taught with pride. It's in the markets where locally made goods are finally being celebrated over imported leftovers. Africa is rediscovering its voice. And for the first time in a long time, that voice isn't asking for validation from Paris or Brussels. It's speaking for itself, loud, clear, and unapologetically free. This isn't just a moment, it's a movement, and it's only just begun. The rejection of EU aid? That was just a symptom. The real disease was Europe's outdated belief that Africa still needed a babysitter. But what came next? Unprecedented. In January 2025, something historic happened. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger didn't just walk away from ECOWAS. They tore up the script written in foreign ink. Why? Because ECOWAS, once seen as a symbol of West African unity, had become too cozy with foreign powers, especially France. But instead of falling into isolation, these three nations did something no one saw coming. They chose unification. They announced the birth of a new vision, the Alliance of Sahel States, a bold confederation focused on mutual defense, economic independence, and technological sovereignty. No more waiting for loans from Brussels. No more begging Washington for digital infrastructure. They eliminated roaming charges, allowing citizens across borders to call and connect freely. They held joint military drills, sending a message to anyone watching. We will defend ourselves. They pooled energy resources, tapping into shared strength. And now they're laying the foundation for something game-changing, a shared central bank, one step closer to financial freedom from old empires. This isn't just diplomacy. This is a revolution in real time. Africa isn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. It's building its own. And the world, it's finally starting to listen. Let's be honest. If the European Union doesn't even recognize Niger's government as legitimate, why are they still trying to fund projects behind its back? Ask yourself, if it's not about respect, if it's not about sovereignty, then what is it about? Isn't it time we admit the uncomfortable truth? Western aid has never been about compassion. It's been about control, influence, keeping a foot in the door of African affairs under the cover of charity. But what happens if more African nations follow Niger's lead? What happens when they say, keep your crumbs? We're not for sale. Because let's be real, the so-called aid they offer is peanuts compared to the trillions siphoned out of Africa through exploitation, extraction, and rigged deals. So here's the question. What if Africa stops begging and starts building? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, history is watching. And if you want more videos like this, stories about African leaders who are breaking the mold and pushing the continent forward, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and stay with us.